Hi, this is Jim Musser with Upstream Ministries, and this is episode 48, Views from Downstream. And this week we're talking about being strong and courageous when it comes to raising kids spiritually. And I talked about Monday how that phrase is quoted 11 times in the Old Testament. First, God talking to Moses and saying those words, and then saying those words to Joshua, and then David saying those same words to his son Solomon. And I shared a little bit about my own journey in this with Upstream Ministries and how God has called me to be strong and be courageous, persevering. And then on Wednesday, I spoke to pastors and church leaders about the need for them to be strong and courageous, to begin following the biblical mandate to make disciples, which, in my estimation, the church is not doing a very good job at all. And today I'd like to speak to parents, and you too need to be strong and courageous in how you raise your kids spiritually. And what I mean by that is that there is a certain cultural flow in our general culture, but also in the Christian culture of how we raise kids and what we do. And so when you make decisions that are based on how you want to raise your kids, and particularly spiritually, you may experience some resistance or some criticism, or at least some people just don't understand why you're doing what you're doing. And you need to be prepared for that. And for instance, when your kids reach the age of going to school, you are going to have to make a decision. Do you send them to public school? Do you send them to private school? Do you do homeschool? And there's reason that people do that. Public school, people think that they need the social skills and exposed to the world and learn how to deal with it so they'll be better prepared as adults. Private schools, many parents want to send their kids there to kind of keep the kids isolated from all the bad influences and focus on the good influences. And then others want to homeschool their kids, mainly for the same reason people send them private school, but obviously it's cheaper, and parents have more control over the education. But wherever you choose of those three, you're going to probably have people who would choose otherwise. And so you just have to be prepared for that. And also, we live in a culture that says we need to get our kids in as many activities as possible. And so you see that with sports, with music, with dancing, gymnastics, debate, academic things, that the understanding of the culture is we've got to get our kids involved in multiple things so that they'll be well-rounded. And that's okay. There's none of those things are bad in themselves. But what we have to realize is that they all take time, they all take energy, and they all take money. And so when you're considering these things, you need to take into account how much time do you have, how much energy do you have, how much money do you have, and factor that in. And also, how is this going to affect raising my kids spiritually? Am I going to have time and energy to do that? Because I have met parents who are literally overwhelmed, driving their kids to and fro from practice to practice. If several kids are in the family, then often both parents are driving in multiple directions to make sure their kids make their lessons. And so there's really no time other than just spending it chauffeuring your kids from one practice to another or one game to another. And the question is, Do you have time to disciple your kids? Or are all these things getting in the way? And you have to be strong and courageous to make that decision. Hey, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to limit my kids' activities, and they just may not be able to do everything they want to do because there are other things that are important, and particularly raising my kids in a way that they will be discipled. And so we need to just be strong and courageous and not follow the culture, because you can just see it, the frenetic activity around their kids, and everybody's exhausted. And often what happens, even though they've been on these activities, when they graduate from high school, they really don't have a deep spiritual faith. They just know how to play sports or play an instrument or whatever. And again, those can be valuable, but they should not take the place of following Jesus. And so parents, you're going to need to be strong and courageous to make decisions that are best for your kids, and regardless of what everybody else thinks. And God is calling us to do that. You need to seek him out and get a sense of where he's leading you and raising your kids, and then you need to do that. And if it goes against the culture, it goes against the culture. That's where the strength, that's where the courage comes in. And one more thing I want to say is that it takes strength and courage to actually admit, hey, I have no idea how to disciple my kids. I've never been discipled myself. I don't know what I'm doing. Can you help me? You know, that is a humble admission, and it can be embarrassing, but it's a needed admission, because you're called to be a disciple, you're called to be discipled, and you're called to disciple others. And so you need to be discipled in order to learn how to do it. So if you haven't been discipled, humbly admit that. Humbly admit you really don't know how to do it, and get people to help you to do it so that you can be an effective disciple. And we're going to pick up next week on another topic. All right. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.